this video, we'll be going over how change orders work in BuildExact. We'll look at the different types of change orders and where they start from. Then we'll dive into two examples. One where we're starting a change order from the actual costing screen, and another from the change orders tab. And we'll also show you how invoicing ties in and touch on a quick note for cost plus jobs. Jumping into my account now, and there are actually 4 different places you can start a change order. 2 of them happen kind of automatically, meaning they start somewhere else and then end up in change orders. The first one is selections. So if your client is making selections and they pick something with a price difference, you'll see the option to create a change order for it. I'm not going to go into how selections themselves work in this video, but once that selection becomes a change order, everything we talk about here will apply. The same goes for requests for quotes or RFQs. When you create an RFQ, one possible outcome is that it turns into a change order. Again, we're not diving into how to do an RFQ right now, but once it becomes a change order, everything we're covering today is still relevant. The 2 I am going to focus on are starting a change order from the actual costing screen and starting one from the change orders tab. If you've watched some of our other videos, you've probably heard me say that if you are working on something you originally estimated for, meaning it is listed in your actual costings, that's where you'll start the process of creating an order. You'll select that line item or items and create the order here. This is how BuildExact knows to connect everything correctly and lets you see the comparison between what you estimated versus what it actually cost. It's basically your way of saying, hey, this change is linked to this specific item. When I start a change order from actual costings, I usually think of it as an in-scope change. Maybe we originally scoped a certain item, but now we need to swap it out, and I can just grab it from here and make that change directly. Or maybe the client decides to purchase something themselves and wants a credit back. Since that cost started here, I'd go to actual costings to start that process. Now, if I start a change order straight from the change orders tab, I think of that as an out-of-scope change. The kind of thing that comes up on site when the client says, hey, while you're doing this, can you add a skylight? Something you didn't estimate for to begin with. So that's really the difference. If it ties back to something you did estimate for, start it from the actual costing screen. But if it's something completely new that's being added on, start it from the change orders tab. All right, let's go through a few examples together. And there are a couple of different cases you'll run into here. First up, let's say I've got an item that's being refunded or swapped. I can just grab it from my actual costings. In this case, maybe it's the tile we're swapping. Then down at the bottom, I'll click change order. And right away, you'll see it flips from $600 to negative $600. The reason it does this is because BuildExact assumes that amount is being refunded or that you're about to add a replacement item, like a different type of tile, and it'll balance out the difference automatically. So I'll add in the new tile they've selected as a new line item, and you can see either the difference they'll owe or what they would be credited back. In this case, the new tile they picked out is a little bit more than what we budgeted for, and if they had chosen a less expensive tile, you'll see a negative marker next to this number. I'm also going to give this a simple title like tile change, whatever you want to title this to reflect what the change is. And we also have the options to put a proposed start date and delay days. These are completely optional. The start date is handy if you've already discussed a specific time with the client, like, hey, we'll get started on Monday. You can just pop that date in and it'll appear on the document for clarity. For delay days, if this change might even cause a small delay, 2 or 3 days, it's a good idea to include that. It'll show on the document and help set expectations with the client. Of course, if it's something bigger, like waiting on an item from overseas that could be weeks instead, the idea is just to communicate how this change affects the overall timeline. Then for the details section. This is usually where you'll write something simple like, as discussed, we're confirming the swap of the tile from this one to that one, and I'll type something in here so you can see where that shows up on the final document. And before I save this or send it out to the client, there's one important thing to check. When you add a new item, like our new tile here, make sure to fill out the actuals category. This is how we tell BuildExact where that cost should show up in our actual costings report. Basically, it's saying, what is this cost related to? So you can compare what you originally estimated against what you actually spent. When you click into that field, you'll see a drop-down appear of all the categories from your actual costings. And in this case, since I'm swapping one item for another, I want that new cost to land in the same category as the original item. So I'll go ahead and select Finishes. All right, let's talk about markup. There are a few different ways people handle it, but the main thing to think about is what your client actually saw in the estimate. So for example, if you had something listed as an allowance item where the markup was already built in, I'd go back and check your estimate costing screen, take a look at what the client saw as the final price, assuming you included that price in their quote. But if you didn't include it, then you've got a little bit more flexibility with how you apply markup. But what we're really talking about here is the agreement with the client that all change orders, all new items will get a markup on it and you retain the original markup? Or is your agreement with the client that you're marking up the difference when it comes to change orders? If it's that second scenario where you're only marking up the difference, then you'll see it show as a negative markup for the credit and a positive markup for the new amount. BuildExact will just net those together automatically. We've even seen cases where builders have a flat fee per charge, like $100 per change order. If that's how you handle it, that's totally fine. You can always add an extra line for that fee. So let's go ahead and process this one. When you're just getting started, I'd recommend clicking Save and Close first. That way you can go to your Change Orders tab, print it, and double check everything before sending it out to the client. Once you've done a few of these and you're comfortable with how they look, then you can go straight to the Save and Send option, since you already know what to expect. So I'll go ahead and say Save and Close, and we'll print this one so we can take a look. Here we are, and a few things to point out. You'll see it pulls in all the fields we talked about earlier, things like the delay days, start date, and any details you typed in. And this is a really clear layout for the client. They can see what we're replacing or crediting back, and the new item, and how we got to that final figure. There's also these two boxes here, current contract total and proposed contract total. The whole point of those is to give the client a quick snapshot of how each change affects their total. Especially when there are a lot of change orders, it helps prevent that situation where a client just approves everything and then realizes their total contract's gone up by 50 grand. This way they can see the impact of each change as they go. Down here, there's a short statement for the client along the lines of, I accept this change and understand the details outlined above. And some people prefer to print and have these signed manually, which is totally fine. But if you are sharing the change order directly from BuildExact, you can use the digital signature option, and I'll show you how that works in just a second. We'll jump back into BuildExact, and from here, I'll click the Share button. That's going to prompt us to send the change order to the client. This is also the same option we saw earlier when we were entering the details of our change order, where there was the Save and Share button. Same idea here, just a different spot to access it. From here, you'll see the option for digital signature right up top. And if you don't want to collect a signature and just want to send the client a PDF copy, you can switch it over to standard instead. But for this example, I'll leave it on digital signature. Over on the left, you'll see where you can select the recipient, and by default, it'll pull in your client's contact information. But if there's anyone else you'd like to add, you can do that here. But I'm just going to send this to myself so you can see what it looks like from the client's point of view. Also, if you do use the client portal, we can send that over there as well. And we do have another video that focuses on the client portal, so I won't get into that here. You can also edit the body of the email if you want to personalize the message, and even add attachments if you need. Once that's ready, I'll go ahead and send it to myself, and we'll jump over to my email so we can see what the client would receive. So here is our email, and they have the option to click this link, which will pull them in to review the change order, and when they're ready, the option to digitally sign. And they also have a PDF version which they can download. But I'll click View and Sign. From here, I'll click the option to digitally sign. And the note on top states, by signing the variation, you are accepting terms and conditions and any costs. And by the way, variation is just another word for change order. So I'll go ahead and give it a signature. And a quick point on where all this goes. Once the client is signed, they'll get an email, you'll get an email, and you'll also get an alert in BuildExact notifying you that they've signed and accepted the change order. So if we go back to BuildExact, you'll see there's an alert in the job section saying, hey, you've had a change order digitally signed. Go and view it. And I'll click View, and that'll pull me in to see the change order. And I'll also go ahead and dismiss this notification. Good practice is once you've viewed that notification and actioned it, go ahead and dismiss it. Otherwise, these notifications can pile up on each other. Now, our change order has been accepted, which means that the changes involved in this change order are processed. So we'll now see that line item listed in our actual costings. And as a little side point, you can drag and drop these around if you'd like to have them in a particular order. You can even add notes over here to say refunded, whatever you want, whatever helps you. But the net change here is we have taken away the original item, added a new one, and the estimated value here shows it. All right, before we jump into invoicing, let's look at the second scenario, creating a change order for something completely new, something that wasn't a part of your original estimate. This one will go a bit quicker since most of the process is the same. In this case, instead of starting in actual costings, I'm going to start right here in the Change Orders tab. I'll click Add Change Order, and this is where you'd handle those unexpected or out of scope changes. For this example, I'll say we're adding a skylight. The fields here are exactly the same as before. You'll fill in the details, just like we've already covered, and I'll add my costs. Maybe the skylight materials cost around $450, and the installation comes out to about $800. Everything else works the same way. Markups, item descriptions, how it all displays. It follows the same flow we've already walked through. On the actual categories box here, there is no category for the skylight, but I could create a new one where I could title it whatever makes sense, or even add it to the closest fit, but I'll just create a new category and title it skylight. All right, and in this case, I'll just pretend it's already been sent out, digitally signed, and accepted. So I'm going to go ahead and manually change the status here to accepted, which you can do too, but ideally it's always best to actually send it through BuildExact so there's a clear paper trail. That said, there might be times where the client's already agreed to it somewhere else, maybe by email or in a meeting, and you're just updating BuildExact to reflect that without having to send it through again. Okay, moving on to our last 2 points. First, invoicing the change order in either a fixed price or a completion percent job. You can go into any of the invoices and you'll see any change orders sitting there, highlighting that you have change orders that you need to charge for. And you can choose to charge the full amount or whatever percentage you want to claim for it. And you can absolutely split it up across multiple invoices. We do get the question, what if it's between these claim stages and I just want to bill the change order on its own? That's fine too. You can add an invoice just for that change order, and you can create a change order whenever you need. All right, now lastly, a special note for cost plus jobs. There are 2 things to highlight here. Number 1, if you've never done a cost plus job, this part of the video won't be relevant to you. From here on, we're talking solely about the cost plus change order element. So with cost plus jobs, invoices are generated based on purchase orders and work orders you've actually marked as received or completed. Basically, anything you've already spent money on. That means if you create a change order, it doesn't automatically go through for invoicing. Even though the client might have approved the change, BuildExact won't invoice for it until there's an actual cost logged against it, like when you record a purchase order or a work order to that change. Once the change order is approved, it'll show up in your actual costing screen. And from there, as soon as you record costs against it, you can include that in your next invoice. That's the key difference in how cost plus jobs work. Because of that setup, change orders in a cost plus job are often used more as documentation or client confirmation, just to keep a record and get their sign off, rather than being strictly contractual like in a fixed price job. So that's really the key difference. The other difference here is when you add a line item, if you're looking closely, you'll notice there's no markup box. That's again due to the nature of how we process invoices for cost plus work. The client should understand that. It's the raw cost plus whatever, 15, 20%, whatever you've agreed to. And because of that, we're showing them just the raw cost when you do a cost plus change order. And it only gets that extra markup percentage when it hits the invoicing stage. Because of that, we've absolutely had people put in notes to the effect of, note, this is before markup is added, or something similar, whatever helps you communicate that point. The reason for highlighting this is to avoid the scenario where the client goes, oh no, I thought this was the full amount. When they see their invoice, it'll be clear that the full amount is plus markup, and hence having a note here can be really helpful. All right, and that is all for change orders. Give them a go, and as always, if you have any questions, please let us know.